welcome back. And now we will officially start our story of Magellans Voyage. I hope that you understand. I hope that you understand the story of what do you call this? The short history of Spain, so that more or less you will know where Magellan came from and you know who our colonizers were. So we are going to start with Magellan's Voyage. Okay, so as you know, Magellan was already chosen. He was allowed by the monarchs of Spain to sail. Okay, I believe it was Charles already who allowed Magellan to do this. Okay, so let us start here. So this is actually where Magellan was born. So he was born in Portugal, and he was born in a very coastal area. So I think this contributed to his his affinity towards the water, that he really loved the ocean. And I'm guessing because it was trending during their time, like joining the school of navigation and all. So this was really in the blood of Magellan. And then when he was about a young boy, probably around 10 or something, he served as a page to Queen Leonora's court. So Queen Leonora was the Queen of Portugal, and he managed to secure a position as a page. A page is someone who kind of like does whatever lang. Like for example, if the queen says, okay, go and do this for this, he will do that. Like he was kind of like an assistant or something. So he secured a job as a page. And then after that, so during this time when he worked at Queen Leonora's court, he would hear so many stories about exploration, because again, it was very trending. So whenever there would be a visitor in the queen's court, little Magellan would be there. You can just imagine, he would be like, fascinating. What's a caravel? So he must have really found all those things largely fascinating. Okay? And then after that, it was also during this time that he heard about the spice trade. Now, what is the spice trade? I cannot proceed with this lesson unless I know that you understand how important spices were during this time. Now, he heard that spices were the most important commodity during this time. Today, the most important commodity of the world is oil. Okay? Oil is the most important commodity in the world. Whoever controls the oil, they say, controls the world. So before, whoever controlled the spices controlled the world. Now, why spices? I mean, isn't it like spices like pepper, cinnamon, and all of that, now these are very commonplace things, but before this was not, because spices could not grow in Europe. Spices could not grow in Europe because of the weather. So it only grew in parts of near the equator, in equatorial places, which included the Philippines, in like tropical rainforesty kind of places ba. So, and then before spices were ever introduced to Europe, their food was actually very gross. They would just boil without salt and pepper. Can you imagine? Like, they would grill a pig without salt and pepper, and then so it lacked flavor. Plus, they could not really preserve the food because they did not have salt. And then they did not have refrigerator, so there were no preservatives. Plus, spices would have medicinal purposes, particularly the spice called clove, okay? Clove could heal so many ailments, and it was really very important, a very important commodity during this time. And so many of the explorers that did not just want to explore to find a whole new world, but they really wanted to control the spice trade. So, grabe, you know what? You could even, spice was so important before that you could buy an entire slave. Like, if you wanted to buy a slave with just a tiny bag of pepper and peppercorn. Grabe gyud ka precious. Like, if you wanted to marry a girl, you can just give the dad a bag of pepper for her. So that would be enough already. But it was just very important. And so they wanted to control the spice trade also. Now, Magellan, so he heard about the spice trade, he heard about stories of exploration. So naturally, when he was old enough, he became an explorer. And in 1505, he sailed with his brother to India through a Portuguese fleet. Okay, so he was Portuguese baya. So he went to India, he went to Africa, he went to Morocco. So he got to see the world. And Magellan was really amazed by what traveling could offer. When he went to Morocco, actually Morocco is one of my goals to go to visit. This is a place that I really want to see. So when he went to Morocco, he this is actually where Magellan got his limp. His legs started to limp because he was injured in one of the skirmishes here in Morocco. So when he was in Morocco, naglimp, because they always describe Magellan as someone who would walk with a limp. You know what a limp is? They will walk like kind of like that. Okay, now, so when he was still in Portugal, they actually reached the Spice Islands, which is Ternate. And during this time, this is where he acquired a slave called Enrique. Now, Enrique de Malacca is actually one of the most interesting characters in history because he was taken from the Spice Islands, which is very near the Philippines, and he was brought back to Spain. And he became one of the best like staff that Magellan ever had. That when Magellan even in his will, Magellan even gave property to Enrique. He included Enrique in his will because Enrique was such a good asset to Magellan. Plus, he could speak the native language of the Spice Islands. He would tell Magellan about the Spice Islands. So he served even as Magellan's guide during his trip to the Philippines. So this is where he acquired Enrique, and Enrique played a very important role in Magellan's life. So grabe yun si Enrique. He actually a large reason why Magellan even ventured to travel, wanted to find a route to Asia, was because of in the information that he got from Enrique. There's this place, and then Inana, and then so he was so inspired by that. Okay. He would tell Magellan about the abundance of pepper and how pepper was all over the place. Because now, pepper, it's like we don't value pepper as much. Probably because we're living also in the Philippines and pepper grows so quickly here. And so, valued kayo ang pepper. And then he was like, oh, Magellan, if you go to the Spice Islands, there's so much pepper there. You're going to make your country very rich. So, ingana. So, Magellan told the king. What was his name? Manuel. King Manuel. I have devised a plan that we can sail across the Atlantic to America, and then and then we will find a way, and then we will be able to go to Asia already. And then King Manuel was like, King Manuel hated Magellan. So King Manuel was like, no, I don't trust you. We're so busy already. We have Africa, we have India, and there's too many territories already. I want to concentrate on those territories. So Magellan was like, okay, fine, whatever. Then I am going to go to Spain. Okay? He renounced his Portuguese territory and he married Beatriz. Beatriz was a Spaniard. Okay? Now, Beatriz was a Spaniard. He renounced his Portuguese citizenship and said, okay, fine, then I'm going to be a Spaniard. Maybe the Spaniards will listen to me. So he had his wife and everything. And so Magellan went to King Charles I of Spain. And King Charles I of Spain, he was the grandson of Ferdinand and Isabel. When he heard about Magellan's plan, he liked it. He was like, okay, that's a good plan, Magellan. Okay, I'm going to support you, but you have to sail under the flag of Spain. You cannot say you're Portuguese anymore. Anyway, you have your wife, whatever. You don't like Manuel in Portugal, so let's do this. So King Charles gave Magellan the funds that he needed in order to make this expedition. So he gave Magellan Antonio Pigafetta. And Antonio Pigafetta's job was to chronicle everything. Okay, here's Pigafetta. I want a record of everything. So Pigafetta, you'll be like the blogger, Pigafetta, ha? You'll be like the blogger of Magellan, and you tell me everything that happened and where he went, how he dealt with them, and I want to read everything about it when you come back from your journey. So that was Pigafetta's job. He was actually Italian. He was not Portuguese, he was not Spanish, he was Italian. Okay, now, Charles also gave Magellan 5 ships. Okay, this is the Armada de Moluccas. The entire armada was called the Armada de Moluccas, and they were composed of 5 ships. Okay, Trinidad, which is the flagship, that's the leader. Okay, San Antonio, the largest ship. Concepcion, Victoria, Santiago. Santiago was the smallest ship. It was the caravel. And it was Santiago's job to go first to try to see if it's safe for the bigger ships to pass. So, Trinidad, San Antonio, Concepcion, Victoria, and Santiago. So, 5 ships. Now, Magellan said, okay, I have Pigafetta, I have my ships, now we need men. But the men were scared. The usual sailors did not want to sail with Magellan. Number 1, because it was unknown territory. Even if they found America, they said, okay, fine. Then America was not the abyss. But what about beyond that? Maybe we will fall into an abyss beyond that. It's still, the world is still flat. They did not actually prove that the world was round until Magellan. Okay, so he said, okay, but the world, I don't like. So Magellan was having a hard time. He would even go to the jails and saying, okay, prisoners, if you join me in this voyage, when you come back to Spain, you're a free man. No matter what your crime was, you're a free man. You know, a lot of the prisoners were kind of like, no, I'll just take my chances here in jail. I think I'll survive better here. Like, give mo kuyog niya. Plus, they, aside from the danger that was involved, they were even scared because Magellan was Portuguese. They were like, maybe you won't be loyal to the Spanish flag, ha? Because you're Portuguese. So it's like questionable. So that was the issue with that. So Magellan was really having a hard time finding men. So in the end, thankfully, there were 270 men that decided to join Magellan. So here we have the entire trip of Magellan. So from Sanlúcar de Barrameda, he crossed all the way here. And then after that, here, and then he found the Pacific Ocean, and then he reached the Philippines. So this is the entire the entire voyage of Magellan. And as you can see from the Philippines, it's not dark red anymore. It's because Magellan was no longer there. Because as you know, he would be killed in the Philippines. Okay, so this would be the ship of Magellan. So actually, when they reached Port San Julian here, they lost the Santiago, because when the Santiago went ahead, there was a storm, and then the Santiago sunk. And then after that, when the Santiago sunk, the San Antonio ship mutinied. The San Antonio was a very large ship, and it carried a lot of the food and the supplies. It mutinied and it went back to Spain. So actually, there were only 3 ships that crossed the Pacific Ocean. Grabihan, no? I mean, that's why they lacked so many supplies, because the supply ship went back to Spain. It could not take the trip anymore. Pagani, halfway pagani, grabe. Now, after all the hardships that they faced, they finally entered the Pacific Ocean. Actually, it was Magellan who named it the Pacific Ocean, Mar Pacifico, or the Pacific Ocean in English, because Pacifico means peaceful. Because the sea in the Atlantic Ocean is very rough. It's very black and rough because of the high freshwater content from the South Pole and all of that. But when you go to the Pacific Ocean, it is more peaceful and blue because it has more salt water content. And then after that, so it was just one of the most beautiful things that Magellan had ever seen. And then he was very amazed, so he called it Mar Pacifico. And then they sailed the Mar Pacifico, but it was a tough trip. They ran out of food. They were starting to eat the rats already in the ships, the ropes of the ships, their shoes, and then because and then they had to wait if they could not fish for anything. Lisod, they started to, when it would not rain for a couple of days, they won't have fresh water. It was such a bad trip. And then plus they were experiencing rickets and scurvy already. Their gums started to bleed, their joints were swollen, they looked like zombies. So, and then they docked in Guam. They finally docked in Guam. And then when they were in Guam, I mean, I can't imagine, the natives of Guam must have been very scared to see them, no? This ship would dock and they were like, help us, we're hungry. And then their gums were swollen. They would look like zombies, good. If I were from Guam, I would run away. But then, you know, island people are generally very chill. So the people of Guam welcomed them and said, oh, here, refresh yourselves. Here's food, here's water, and all of that. So they stayed in Guam for a bit. And then after that, finally, they left and found the Philippines. But it was not called the Philippines yet. And it was such a surprise to Magellan because Enrique was there, right? Enrique could speak to some of the people here in the Philippines, particularly those of royal blood. That is why there is a great contention among historians now. They're always debating whether Enrique was Filipino or not. But then there was no such thing as Filipino manggod before. That concept was not there because Filipino people who lived in the Philippines did not call themselves Filipinos because it was not yet the Philippines. It was just a group of islands in Southeast Asia. Okay, so when they arrived there, Enrique could speak to some of the people, particularly those of royal blood, and this greatly helped Magellan. So now he had a translator. So Enrique's job as a translator was very important, and that is why Enrique was able to convince the people to do so many things for the Spaniards. Now, let's go to Humabon versus Lapulapu. So this is probably one of the most important things that I have ever read about. So now, Humabon versus Lapulapu. There were two chieftains or kings here in Cebu. Humabon was in where Cebu City proper really is, and Lapulapu was in Mactan. Okay, so he was the king of Mactan. These two were not friends at all. Some of you already know this story, but I'm just going to repeat it. Humabon and Lapulapu hated each other. They really did. They were not good friends. Okay, so there. This would be Lapulapu and this would be Humabon. Humabon and Lapulapu did not get along, and they already didn't get along. But then one day there was an incident where a Chinese trader came to the Philippines, okay, came to Cebu and traded. But Humabon was not home. Probably he was taking a trip somewhere, but Lapulapu was. So Lapulapu was able to trade with the Chinese personally, and the Chinese said, okay, we're going to leave some freebies here. So thank you for trading with us. Here are freebies. Thank you. Humabon's people traded with the Chinese also, but Lapulapu did not give them freebies. Lapulapu kept the freebies all to himself. Lapulapu took it back to Mactan. Because Lapulapu maybe believed na, oy ako, rani, oy nga, no bitaw Humabon was absent. You know, if Humabon wanted freebies, then he should have been here. When Humabon came home from wherever he came from, Humabon was like, oh, how was the trade? And they were like, oh, oh, sir, okay kayo, sir. But then, you know, kanang the freebies ba? There were freebies manunta from the Chinese, but then Lapu-Lapu took it to Mactan. Humabon got so mad. And he was like, Lapu-Lapu, return those freebies. And Lapu was like, no. I mean, it was given. It was a gift. It's not like you bought them, but I kept them. It was a gift, and I was there, so first come, first serve. You snooze, you lose, Humabon. Humabon got so mad, and he said, if you are not going to give those freebies back, Lapu-Lapu was like, what? What are you gonna do? You're gonna fight me? You know, Baya, I'm very strong, huh? My warriors are very tough. So Humabon was like, yeah, he's right. Okay, fine. One day, Lapu-Lapu, one day, I'm gonna get you. I'm going to get you, and you are going to suffer. But Humabon was waiting for the right opportunity. So there, Humabon versus Lapu-Lapu. They were like, just you wait. Just you wait. Lapu-Lapu If I looked like this, I wouldn't fight Lapu-Lapu. Lapu-Lapu looked so tough. And then after that, around this time, this was around the time that Magellan arrived. When Magellan arrived, Humabon saw that Magellan had weapons that were very superior. Because silang Magellan, when they arrived, they were showing off. Man said, "Oh, see, look at our cannons, look at our guns, look at our weapons, look at our, what do you call that, armor, look at our body armor, like this. Oh, look at our armor here," and all of that. Humabon then said, "Light bulb." The light bulb gayon appeared. And he said, "Oh, but the light bulb wasn't it. Never mind. Okay, a candle? Or, I don't know, do they have candles? Forget it. A firefly. Okay, a jar of fireflies. Did they have jars? I don't know. Never mind, forget it. Forget the analogy." And then anyway, Humabon had an idea and said, "If I befriend these white strangers, maybe we can fight Lapu-Lapu and get rid of him once and for all." So he was so happy. He was like, "Yes, I will finally get rid of that annoying king in Mactan." So Humabon was super mega friendly with Magellan. "Oh, Magellan, what do you want? You come here, eat our best food, drink our best wine. You already know the best wine of ancient Filipinos, right? It was tuba. Eat our best fish. So here, okay, sige, what do you want?" Then Magellan was like, "I want to have a mass and tell you about Roman Catholicism." Humabon was like, "Sige, we will convert. Oh, come here. You want to change my name to Carlos? Sige. You want to change my wife's name to Juana? Sige. My entire kingdom will be Roman Catholic? Sige." So Humabon was like, "Yes, I will do it. I will do that. Anything to be on the side of these white people so that they can kill Lapu-Lapu for me." So Humabon said, "Aha, I know what to do. I'm gonna have a party." And then Humabon had a party for the new visitors, and he invited all the kings, and he also invited Lapu-Lapu. And then when Lapu-Lapu was here at the party, he did not like the presence of the Spaniards ba. And then he was kind of like, "Pugiro ba anyway?" And then the Spaniards were like, "We are going to make a demonstration of how good our shields are and our weapons." So they put on their armor, and then they were like, and then pew, pew, pew. I don't know what they did. So Lapu-Lapu, being the smart man that he was observing them, and he said, "You have armor that's very heavy. And you say it's impenetrable, but look at your joints. It's vacant here in the joint areas and the knees because you're gonna have to move. So those are your weak spots. You're only telling me where your weak spots are." So Lapu-Lapu was like, okay. And then in the end of all of this, Magellan was like, "Okay, we are now going to collect tribute from you because we are going to offer you protection, and then in return, you just give us tribute." And Lapu-Lapu was like, "Why do we need protection? Protection from whom? Protection from you? Like, I don't know who we need protection from." And so Lapu-Lapu was like, "No way, no, I'm not gonna give you tribute." And then Magellan was like, "Then this means war." And Humabon was like, "Oh, my plan is finally happening." Humabon was so happy. And then also, "This means war." And then after that, Lapu-Lapu said, "Okay, then this means war." And then after that, Lapu-Lapu went home and said, "Okay, we're just gonna have to prepare for war here." And Humabon was like, "Haha, you're about to get wiped out." And Magellan was like, "Okay, let's fight. We have a war, whatever, a battle." And then Magellan was like, "Let's just take around 30 to 40 men. I think kaya ra. And then, yeah, let's do this. Sige, let's attack them tomorrow. No warm up. But sir, tomorrow man, sir. I mean, some of our men got drunk because tuba baya is very strong, ha? Tuba is and lambanog, they're very, very strong." They're like, sige, fine." So they were a little hungover, and then they were going to attack, and then it was really not a good idea. But Magellan was so proud. This is what you call hubris. Hubris is a word that says it's the pride that comes before the fall. And here we see the hubris of Magellan. And Magellan was like, yeah, let's go, let's attack. Dawn, with half drunk soldiers who are tired. And then they were like, okay, let's go. Lapu-Lapu was smart. So Lapu-Lapu was kind of like, okay, I think they're going to attack us at dawn. That's good because in Mactan at dawn, it's low tide. Even if you go to Mactan right now, you will really see that at dawn, during the side where Lapu-Lapu had his kingdom, it's very low tide during the dawn. And the low tide pag in Mactan, it's a very, very long. It's a very long low tide. And so, but Lapu-Lapu said, oh, okay, I'm confident because then they won't be able to dock their ships here and the cannons will not be able to fire. So then it was like, this is going to be interesting. And so when Magellan was like, they were like, Mr. Magellan, we cannot pull our ships closer to the shore already because it's too low tide. And then Magellan said, okay, fine, then let's land here and let's just go and get this over with. Hubris. They couldn't even fire their cannons if the shore was here. It was like, fire, bloop, fire, bloop, and then it would not even reach. So silang Lapu-Lapu, they could see silang Magellan were already approaching and then they were just hiding. They were hiding in the cover of darkness and they prepared their swords and their spears and their arrows, which were poison tipped. So when Magellan and his men finally arrived, the men of Lapu-Lapu fired their arrows with no mercy, fired them to the incoming Spaniards. So here, sorry, it says I have a map. This would be the ships of Magellan and this would be the island of Mactan. This is a very old map. Look, Insula Matan. It's so nice. Okay, so now, see, that's why it's still a little bit dark because it was at the cover of darkness and that they were able to fight. And Lapu-Lapu said, aim at the weak spots, the joints. Don't aim at the chest like we usually do because it's covered. Aim at the neck, aim at the shoulder, aim at the hip. Okay, because those are the weak spots. And the Battle of Mactan concluded in so much blood. There was defeat. They said that Magellan, in the account of Pigafetta, they said that Magellan was hit in the face. An arrow hit him in the face, and then but he did not die yet. And then, basta, it was a little exaggerated, I think. But then Magellan died, and then not necessarily in the hands of Lapu-Lapu, but definitely during this battle. And Magellan died, and Pigafetta wrote about it. And then the Filipinos, the Lapu-Lapu and his men took Magellan's body, took Magellan's body and never returned it. So we don't really know what happened to Magellan's body, but most likely it was quartered. Quartered is hacked into 4 pieces, and they were probably sent to other villages to warn them na, see, if we can defeat these people with superior weapons, then what can we do to you? We are really the strongest. And the Spaniards were very, very embarrassed. More than embarrassed, their morale was really broken. Plus, the Filipinos burned the Concepcion. The Concepcion was one of the ships. So now only the Trinidad and the Victoria are left. Okay, so they burned the Concepcion and it was really such a tragedy. And then after that, Humabon was so embarrassed. He was like, what? Napildi? Oh no, I have to protect my reputation. So Humabon was kind of like, because if the rest of the kings here in Cebu will know that I sided with the whites and that they lost, it's so embarrassing. I have to save my face. So what Humabon did was like, okay, to mourn the death of Magellan, we are going to have a little get together with food and everything. Okay, let's have a get together here, and then after that, when they had this get together, what Humabon and his men did is that they poisoned the Spaniards. Because when they ate, they poisoned the food, and so many of the Spaniards died, but a few were able to escape. And they were able to take the Trinidad and the Victoria, but most likely the Trinidad sank. So it was actually the Victoria that left, and they arrived in Spain with only 15 of the original 250 men and without Magellan. But Pigafetta was still there. And so his accounts, that's why we know so much about what happened here, because of Pigafetta's account. And So that's a very interesting story in our history, and I hope you enjoyed that story. It's quite an interesting thing. So when the Victoria reached Spain, though, they had items with them, and it was worth 5 times more than the cost of the entire expedition. So the king of Spain was like, we have to send more, because if we got this much money in a failed expedition, how much more if it's a successful expedition? So let's try to colonize the Philippines. Good. So after Magellan, there were still other expeditions. The first expedition that was sent was in 1525. Wait, Magellan arrived 1521, right? So this all happened in that year. So in 1525, Garcia Joffre de Loaiza was sent, and he led 7 ships, and his mission was to find the Trinidad. The Trinidad was a ship. But he experienced bad weather, and the ships of Loaiza got separated from each other. And then Loaiza died of scurvy before even reaching the Philippines. So that was a failed expedition. And then we have Sebastian Cabot. He led 3 ships, and he was given this expedition mainly as a cartographer, a map maker. Map out the Philippines first so that maybe we will know how to colonize it again later. Okay, so map it out first, but then it failed again because Cabot was kind of winging it. There were plans for the voyage, but then he started to say, no, let's go left instead of turning right. In the instruction manual, he said, no, I want to go left. And then when the instruction manual say turn left, he would be like, no, I want to go right. So it failed. It never really, nothing really happened. And then we have Alvaro de Saavedra Siron in 1525. His mission was to find the ships that got separated in the Loaiza expedition. Remember the Loaiza expedition when the ships got separated from each other? His job was to find that and to even try to find out what happened to Lapulapu. So he had a letter for Lapulapu to apologize to Lapulapu for like encroaching on their privacy or whatever. He successfully reached Surigao, which is in Mindanao, in 1528. And so after Magellan, Seron's expedition was actually the one that successfully reached the Philippines. But nothing much happened out of that. They had to turn away because the natives were kind of angry. So Surigao is actually a very interesting place to study early Philippine history because the Spaniards were there. So whoever's from Surigao here, maybe you can message me or comment on the comment section and say, hey, I'm from Surigao. Maybe you know something that I don't know about this period in time. Now, Ruy Lopez de Villalobos in 1542, he was the first one who launched an expedition from Mexico. It's not from Spain anymore because Mexico became a colony of Spain already. So now it's closer na. Mexico na is closer to the Philippines compared to Spain, which is in Europe. Okay, so they also successfully docked in Mindanao, which is good. So they docked in Mindanao, and then he reached Leyte Pajud. So Villalobos from Mindanao, he reached Leyte, and he named Leyte Filipinas in honor of Philip II. Okay, so this is Philip II, the king who sent him. He said in Felipe II or Philip II, he said, okay, I will name Leyte in the Philippines, but King Philip said, no, name that entire archipelago Philippines na lang. So, it's actually Villalobos who carried the name Filipinas. That's why we are called Philippines. Okay? Eventually, so that's it. But he did not successfully colonize because he was largely unsuccessful also. The one that successfully colonized us is Miguel Lopez de Legazpi. They reached Cebu. So, not Mindanao, not Leyte, but they came straight to Cebu. Actually, have you been to Fort San Pedro? That is actually where Miguel Lopez, God willing, when we are under normal circumstances already, I will really take you on a field trip and we will go to Fort San Pedro because that is where Miguel Lopez de Legazpi landed, and that is where the first settlement was established by the Spaniards. So Cebu is actually the oldest city in the Philippines because this is where Miguel Lopez de Legazpi, placed his settlement. Okay, so My hair tangled. So it's so interesting because Miguel Lopez de Legazpi knew that it was very difficult to colonize a group of islands because group lain-lain manggod. So he instead, my dog, he instead decided to use a friendlier course of action. So he established trade. He established the priests that were with him, helped the people. So the people responded more positively to the tactics of Miguel Lopez de Legazpi rather than kind of war and all of that. But actually, it's very interesting because they built Fort San Pedro there in downtown Cebu. Why do you build a fort? For defense, right? So that just goes to show you that the natives before really tried to fight the Spaniards off. That's why they had to build a fort. So you can just imagine like so many natives trying to attack and trying to drive the Spaniards away. But then oh my dog, Chanel, be quiet. And then after that, so they fortified themselves, but eventually, I guess, because of the friendly approach, bloodless approach of Miguel Lopez de Legazpi, the natives were kind of like, maybe they're not so bad. And then they started to kind of open up to these foreigners who taught them new farming techniques. And then eventually, little by little, the Spaniards and the natives started to work together because it said it took around 50 years for the Spaniards to fully colonize the entire Philippines because they did it little by little. So once they were able to establish a colony here in Cebu, which he named City of the Most Holy Name of the Child Jesus. That's very long. It was like Villa Santissimo something something. Nombre, I forgot. And then it's in your book. And then, so once he established the settlement here in Cebu, he used some of the same methods, and he tried to get Luzon, Leyte, and all of that until eventually, after 50 years, we officially became the colony of Spain. But this did not happen overnight. It was really a slow process. So that is how the Spaniards arrived here in the Philippines. So I love telling that story, and I'm so happy that I got to tell you that story, and I hope to see you during our live class. I hope you watch this before live class, okay? So that's it. That was the beginning of our Spanish colonization. So thank you, and I hope you enjoyed.